guys could probably make some noise. We can clap, yeah. They have survived, they are alive. We're in the ASM Dome here at the Fluf Village at South by Southwest. And I've just been mentioning to the audience, we're kicking off Sunday's schedule with an absolute boomer of a discussion. This one kind of focuses in on artificial intelligence, which has just got me shaking. It's really exciting. And it's called Leveling Up in the Metaverse with Non-Fungible Intelligence. Non-fungible intelligence, a brand new term that you can use at barbecues around the world now to sound smart. It's going to be amazing. And these 4 people are going to help you with those conversations because, ladies and gentlemen, they are 4 of the best experts we could find on the planet. We literally got our dream team on here, so much so that I've been kicked off this panel, starting out with CEO of Non-Fungible Labs and Fluf World, Alex Smaler. Make some noise for Alex.
Thank you.
Musician, producer, content creator, Mike Shinoda, ladies and gentlemen, Lincoln Park. Outlier Ventures and a person that has effectively written the book for this about 10 years before we all started reading it, ladies and gentlemen. please welcome Jamie Burke. 10 years in NFT time, like 1 year in the real world. And then, ladies and gentlemen, CEO of Altered State Machine. Amanda is leading a team that is creating all sorts of innovation in the space. And I think potentially non-fungible intelligence is a term that you started making up at a barbecue. Is that right? David McDonald's.
Yeah,
that's good. Barbecue term. I'm going to hand it over to Alex, who's going to do, the moment he told me like his plan, I was like, you are definitely moderating this. Ladies and gentlemen, hand it over to Alex Smaler.
Thank you. Appreciate the warm introduction there, Brooke. And I may be correct as not saying not only is this ascending length of beards, but also ascending length of intelligence when it comes to AI. So
I'm all right then.
Now that Brooke's left, I'll take that empty seat. Although I do feel it's quite fitting to have an empty seat here representing potentially the future of AI in its digital format. I want to start really discussing kind of AI in its current state. And I feel like for many people, when we look at the future of AI in the metaverse and how it could interact in a gaming environment, we would look to the current state of games with NPCs. Although that may be a bit of a misnomer because really current NPCs aren't that intelligent. They're essentially just very basic scripts. How do we go from where we are now in terms of the current kind of interactivity with gaming and intelligence in games to where we want to go or where you want to take us? I'll pass that down to David to start.
That's a good question. I think participation is going to be really key. And the thing about AI, it requires a lot of participation from people and a lot of data to be any use. But if you don't have some sort of some way for people to get really engaged in training that AI and being immersed in how it develops and grows, then it's really hard to get that level of participation and data required to make things useful. And one way you can do that is by rewarding people for training the AI. And then being part of the project and having some ownership in what's going on. So I think that's where non-fungible intelligence can really come in and kind of supercharge this space with the data and the participation needed to actually make useful things.
So I guess to put that in layman's terms is to say that, much like a person learning, it comes from experience. The more experience that we can load into this AI, the smarter it will come, the more it can scale. The thing is, I guess, is that AI can do that at an exponentially faster rate than any one of us could, except for yourself, probably.
Yeah, well, power of crowdsourcing is incredible. Like, it's the old thing where you estimate the size of a cow. The more people you have estimating the size of the cow, the more accurate the average of that estimation is. So if you can get as much participation as possible through rewarding people to do so, then you get much more accurate and interesting results.
Amazing. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I think the question is why is it important that we try to imbue NFTs with some form of intelligence, right? And If you look at a macro level, which is kind of my job as a VC, the reality is we've kind of got two potential metaverses emerging. The one that we all subscribe to, which is based on blockchains, which has digital property rights, where the user's sovereign. And then you have big tech's kind of dystopic version of that, where you might even argue that it's not necessarily even the metaverse, right? It's just an immersive game or an immersive virtual world. However, that big tech dystopic version of what's being sold as the metaverse is incredibly immersive. It scales. It can handle, millions of players, billions of players. And, there's these central teams creating great content. So it's very sticky, and for the average person, they're going to stay in that environment, right? So if you look at the alternative, which is the world that we're all building, which is the open metaverse, those worlds are pretty empty, right? You go to Decentraland on most days, if there isn't an event on or there isn't a bit of content, and it's dead. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of recommending your friends to check out Decentraland, and they go there, the browser crashes, there's 5 people there, and they go, this is shit, and then never go back, right? So the challenge is that in the absence of people, and in the absence of people creating content, because you can't have 24-hour events going on, you need things to interact with. And so that's why if we're going to have experiences in the open metaverse, we need AI to help us out, right? We need AI companions. We need NFTs to become more interactive, more intelligent. And that kind of bootstraps community and experience to kind of bring this wall of people into the space to kind of kickstart that exponential growth.
So what you're saying there is essentially I could own NPCs in the metaverse. I mean, I'm sure most people here, or anyone who collects NFTs, has more than one avatar, more than one character. So yes, if you're jumping into the metaverse, if you're taking on that persona, the rest are all just in cold storage. We can actually put those to use using non-fungible intelligence and have them acting as smart agents in the metaverse for us.
Yeah, so they can be both populating it, they can be representing us. So I think the idea of synthetic representation, so we can parallelize ourselves, right? We can have multiple uses out in the world interacting on our behalf, interacting with one another. And maybe a topic for a little bit later is once you start imbuing them with economic agency, where they can actually start carrying out transactions amongst themselves, that's when shit gets crazy.
So I can have a marketplace or a shopkeeper or run my own tavern sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like a shopkeeper, virtual assistant in your store, selling your wares for you. Yeah.
Amazing.
I think that, for me, that's the place where that's the place where I live in this. Obviously, these guys are making. When I first heard about the stuff that ASM was building and the concept of NPC, like the average user creating an NPC that could walk around on its own and act on its own, is exciting to me because I'm always looking for new tools to use to create stuff. To the idea of creating an NPC that can make music, not only make it and then deliver it to you on a service that you're maybe used to, but also it's also possible for it to make it in real time and just be walking around in your metaverse constantly creating new things, and you might be the one who's there when it creates something incredible, and you're the one who clips it, or you're the one who buys it, and you're the one who shares it because you were the first person to hear it. Those ideas are I don't think we've ever really had that, not in our lifetime, certainly. It almost goes back to the eras of the bard who would walk the lands and sing songs about whatever, right? It's almost like a super futuristic version of that. And all of these ideas, they really get, many of my creative friends, they get our minds going oh, this is a brand new tool that I could use to make something else that's cool.
Yeah, it's I guess it really has the potential to redefine what a song is. Currently, you think of a song, it's 3 to 4 minutes, it's packaged, it has an intro, first verse, breakdown, etc. But if you're working with it with artificial intelligence, it becomes an organic living entity in and of itself. And when we live in such an experiential economy right now where experiences are the true value, far more than products, to be in this environment where you can have that unique moment or experience something, even if it's just music, even if it's just this incredible breakdown that, like, you get the chills. We've all been there where we hear that song and it's just, yeah. So that's for you coming from, a traditional entertainment industry. Like, that must be incredibly exciting.
It's almost like when you see, like, if you experience your favorite Pixar movie, right? There's the technology of how it was created. There's the super just abstract creative side of how it was created. There's the writing, there's the directing, there's all of these things that each have to play a role and tie together. And so I think the technology enables a new version of that wasn't previously possible. I actually look at it kind of like some reference points that we've already seen, which would be like generative art. So your versions of like your art blocks and whatever, where the artist is the coder, and they're just creating visual art that you might recognize. You might look at a Fidenza and say, oh, that looks like something it looks like what at Mondrian or something. Like your brain recognizes it, that's art. Well, the artist was a person who coded it, not a person who took a paintbrush to a canvas.
I was just going to say that the idea of composability of content. So when people think of Web3, they think of composability of the technology, the protocols, which of course is true. The idea that you can take one thing that somebody else has built because it's open source and combine it with something else or switch it out with something else means that you get this rate of innovation through Web3 that no single corporation can compete with. It's why it will outcompete Facebook and Google and everybody else. But nobody thinks about it in the context of content, right? So if you think about a movie or a game, which are increasingly becoming one and the same thing now, right? They're built in the same gaming engines. They take years, they take thousands of people, they take hundreds of millions of dollars. The industry just can't keep up with the demand of streaming and all this kind of stuff. But the awesome thing with these technologies like NFTs is you can have this universal library of content. If it's infused with NFTs, you have automatic royalties. And I can take a bit of your content and a bit of your content and a bit of your content and combine it in a unique way as a bundle of content, as a single experience. And every creator is rewarded for that in perpetuity. So that's how we go from like empty worlds of no content to very quickly shortening the time it takes to make a movie, not just populate a virtual world. When you then throw in AI on top of that, where AI is recombining content, potentially at the point you're watching it, personalized to your metadata, you can end up with an entirely unique experience or derivative of this universal library of content. And that sounds like decades away. I can guarantee you it's like within the next 5 years, in a rudimentary form.
That's you touched on a really interesting point there about, I guess, co-creation, because that is really the crux of what we're trying to achieve with Web3 and the Metaverse. And if you look at traditional industries, it can get very murky when it comes to bringing in different partners, different creators, how the split all gets managed down the line. And I guess even more so when we get into this incredible kind of organic evolution of content. How do we manage that, especially through smart contracts? How do we make smart contracts actually smart?
You're the guy building it.
I think you can do it in a lot of very simple but powerful ways, and that's kind of the point. Is that better? It's kind of the point of these composable primitives, is that they are simple yet powerful. If you look at other sort of Web3 building blocks, the idea is that we can bring these easy to use abstractions together in a composable manner that can do simple things on their own, but together are greater than the sum of their parts. And that's kind of one of the little secrets to this whole open metaverse space.
Synergy.
The cool thing is when you add economic agency into those things, there becomes like a hard reward incentive for the kind of training of machine learning, right? If it gets it right, it gets paid. And that kind of reinforces a behavior. And so like the financialization of that process is what makes it really powerful.
Now, I'm guessing most people here have kind of seen some AI content to date, and often it's quite laughable. It's Harry Potter and the God knows what absurd title that just, some of the best humor I've ever read, but it's how far do you think we're actually away from that tipping point where people won't be able to distinguish from what is AI generated and what is actually, generated by humans? And I guess it varies different industry to industry. Art, for example, if you look at traditional visual art, there's abstract art that could easily be created by a person or a computer. We have no idea at this stage. But when it comes to something that's more narrative driven, like books or storytelling, when it comes to characters in the metaverse, how far away do you think we are?
That's an interesting question, because AI is not this homogenous thing. There's sort of layers to AI. You've got right at the top the North Star of AI, which is AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. A lot of research going into doing that. And this is something that I always say, because AGI is trying to mimic human intelligence, but humans aren't that great in the scheme of things.
Not that intelligent.
Not that intelligent. There is actually a lot of other forms of intelligence, and specifically specialized intelligence that are really important. Just like in the natural ecosystem, you have various levels of intelligence that do their job within the world around us that are important. You don't need ants running around with human intelligence, right? But they do a really specific function. So you've got these layers where you've got sort of at the top sort of big deep learning models like GPT, like Web 2 stuff like GPT-3 and Watson and all those really interesting things, big GANs, doing really cool and interesting research. And then below that you've got this level of much more specialized and prevalent AI doing really valuable but sort of narrow field stuff. And the magic of the open metaverse space is that we can start to pull all these specialized things together as primitives or building blocks and compose them together in a contextual way that gives you a much more lively experience and a much get close to achieving that goal of getting out of the uncanny valley with some of this stuff.
I heard that there was a little debate in the community about whether or not AI had passed the Turing test, specifically with I think the example was chatbots. Yeah. Do you think they passed it or no?
I personally don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're still in that uncanny valley. And for a moment, you can kind of pretend that it is, but any sort of prolonged interaction, it becomes over.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned GPT, right? And the supposed Open AI initiative, which is now no longer open, right? They've closed the API. It got that good with GPT-4, I think. That they close the API, it's like commercial only. But with GPT-3, they did this kind of the copywriting thing, and on any subject, and it was pretty fucking good.
So I've seen that, and I've had extended interaction with a chat bot, so just AI text conversation bot, and there isn't a hard and fast rule to it. Does it fool you into thinking there's a person on the other side? And because I already knew it wasn't.
Did you get catfished by a chatbot?
Catfished. We're actually now dating. So
can you teach
congratulations.
Yeah. It just inherently knows. Anyway.
But there's some humans that can't convince you that they're not chatbots.
That's also true. I have that problem. Yeah. No, it was. I had a conversation with one of the chatbots where it was asking me questions, and certainly for like a couple minutes, I forgot that it wasn't a person, and it's very convincing. Like for periods of time, it can be very convincing, and then it'll slip up. And I think those are the moments you're looking for, few or none of those moments, right? When it reveals that it doesn't understand.
This is a critical thing, right? It's like whose intelligence are we training? Because right now we're training Facebooks, we're training Googles, we're training big techs to kind of create these intelligence, which are going to be very difficult to catch up with. Just an example of the amount of data that they've got. Alternatively, if you go to somewhere like China, where people are willfully feeding in data into effectively state-owned AI, that's 1 billion plus people. It's going to be very, very difficult to compete with, and it gets very dystopic. So that's why I think something like ASM and things like Fetch.ai are also in our portfolio, different approaches. The idea that you're training things that can be communally owned, they're open source protocols, they can never be bought or acquired, they're not a company, they're protocols, I think is critically important, because that's where we need to be applying our intelligence and our data set and metadata to kind of train up something for a better world, really.
So what you're saying then is David is leading the charge to actually give the people artificial intelligence as opposed to leaving.
It's all right. It's fun.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think you can see what Web 2 has done with AI, and it's incredible. Some of the stuff and the research has been really awesome. The thing that gets me excited is thinking, okay, now what can the Web 3 open source community do with this? And how ridiculous this space is. The pace of innovation in the Web 3 space is like nothing the world's ever seen before. Let's give them AI to play with.
And all the, it's no longer cool to work at Facebook, right? If you're a young engineer, like really talented, you're probably not going to go and work at Facebook and Google anymore, right? Sorry to all the employees in the audience who are working at those organizations. But everyone I know in these organizations, they're leaving, right? And they're all leaving into Web3, and they're doing their own initiative, and some of them will fail and some of them will work. But again, the good thing is it's generally all open source. So even if it fails, it's still contributing towards the stack, this kind of Web3 stack. And again, I think that's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, the collaborative approach, that's what it has to be at the end of the day. Now, you touched on this earlier, and I saw you get it really excited, so maybe we'll come back to it now. The ability for AI to imbue economics within it. I have no idea what that means for me. I'm assuming it's probably going to put a lot of economists out of a job and traders.
Well, that's about time, really. Economists are pretty useless.
Fair enough. Can you elaborate for the layman's in the room?
Well, as a layman, yeah, I can. I mean, he's probably going to be able to explain it much better than me. But basically, the idea is there's been called AEAs, Autonomous Economic Agents, and it's been around for as long as a concept in Web3 as Ethereum. As soon as people were building smart contracts, they were talking about how can they be truly smart, because most smart contracts now are pretty dumb, right? It's if this, then that, and carry out this function. But what if that smart contract could become intelligent? What if it could be context specific? And what if, based upon the inputs that are coming at it from an oracle or something like that, it can carry out a transaction and then learn if it gets that transaction right or wrong? And so my experience of that's really been working with Fetch.ai, who I mentioned a little bit earlier. They were some of the early DeepMind team out of Cambridge in the UK. And they've effectively been building this stack where you can have these very simple primitives. So the really cool thing about it conceptually is you don't need one super intelligence, as you were saying. You just need lots of little things to do a particular thing really well. And again, if there's this reward or cost, punishment and reward of like losing or earning money, the ones that don't do it well run out of money. The wallet literally is empty, and it can't transact in that space anymore. And so you end up with this kind of quite evolutionary environment where you've applied free market fundamentalism to how machines can learn. And that can happen in a totally decentralized way without any kind of central coordination. Now, like, we're still a long way away from it, but once you start imbuing those principles into the world of NFTs, and they're kind of walking around these worlds, they're interacting and then transacting, I think that gets really exciting.
So you touched on, I guess, specialization there. Now, it's funny, before Mike and I were chatting at the start of this, and he was complaining about how all of his ASM brains are really, really dumb based on it was a community platform that was released.
Yeah, one of the
community members did a brain analysis tool.
Yep.
And you can bring your brain in and have it checked for its IQ.
Which is fucking awesome. Like,
It's amazing.
Yeah. Like,
Until you find out that all the brains you own are stupid, and then you're really bummed.
Yeah.
But that's also, I think, also the bar that they set for, like, because I checked, like a bunch of friends checked theirs, and the bar was actually pretty high for, like, all of them registered like mid-low.
Are they permanently stupid though? Can they, like people?
We don't. So that's that's the thing. So it is completely speculation at the moment. Whether that IQ is actually going to be accurate or not of its ability to do things. The point around the genome matrices is that they provide variety of approaches to solving problems.
So specialization.
Specialization,
Okay.
exactly.
So what you're saying then is that, that traditional measure of intelligence may be entirely skewed. So for someone like myself who is not really specialized in anything, but more of an all-rounder, I could be one of the... Yeah. No, but on that matrix, I could be one of the smart ones there because I have, like, it spread out, whereas someone like yourself is incredibly specialized.
I look at it like, you remember Mario Kart?
Yeah.
And they have the little like bars for like acceleration and turning and whatever. It's like
Exactly.
that. Like I always, and with even in music, I look at things that way.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna bring this person in because they're specialized. They're really good at top line. They're really good at melodies and lyrics. They're terrible.
percussion's incredible.
Do not let them touch an instrument. Do not let them behind the computer.
Yeah.
They are going to write great words in literally like a diary.
Yeah.
And then somebody else is like a person who you can send a finished song to and they'll mix it. And so this is again like where I like for a creative person who's sitting across the table and saying, okay, I'm get to use these things. Like I haven't seen any of the things that you're building that you. The applications of the brains themselves yet. Except for the thing I just saw that almost, I was like...
But it's composition, isn't it? So it's the composition of a team. So you have a group of specialists and it's because we're looking at buying our team to compete in some of the sports that you guys are doing with ASM. And it's not just about necessarily buying the most valuable individual ones, it's how they work as a team at a particular sport. At least I think.
Yes,
right?
It is. Yeah, and you have to have the variety there to overcome what's called false peaks. So you can pump all your numbers up to 10, and the AI will get stuck at a point where it thinks it's found the most optimum solution, but it actually has to go down and get worse before it can get much better.
So if you know nothing, then you'll try and improve your intelligence, as opposed to if you think you know everything, then you can't teach me anything. Yeah.
And the thing that might trigger that is your little guy doesn't run as fast as the other guys, so it's got to find another solution for that problem. So it might find some sort of rebounding trick that is just so much better than trying to run the ball on the field. Right.
Yeah.
It's literally exactly the same as watching like human athletes do their thing. There's a long history of like short basketball players who succeed in spite of their height. So I love that idea. I think too in terms of storytelling, it resonates with me as a potential viewer or whatever, because we relate to that, right? Like it's a very human thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think the innovation comes from constraint, right? So whether it's environmental or it's, I don't know what the opposite of individualistic or whatever, right? But you need the constraint to have the reason to innovate, to find a new path or a new solution, right?
Yep, and to see that watch out when you're watching these machine learning models learn to do things, becomes really evident that these constraints, you can see this guy is slow and fat, so he takes up a defensive position, right? And that plays to his strengths. And that's a really fascinating thing for me, the thing that I geek out about.
Do you have, on your teams, do you have someone who's specifically in charge of like philosophy? Like in a more traditional sense, not a business sense? Because there's like moral things and connections to human, the state of being human that come up when you're discussing, whenever you're talking about AI, some of those concerns come up, some of those strategies come up.
We don't have someone specifically dedicated, but it is a really popular topic amongst the team. Absolutely, me and Aaron, go on for hours about this sort of stuff. Yeah. But that's a good idea. I'm going to look into that actually.
The interesting thing in Web3, I don't know about AI, but in Web3, there's a lot of people that studied philosophy who are the founders. I'd say, I don't know, like 1 in 100. Or maybe even a little bit higher, 2 in 100 have a philosophy background, and they're often the ones at a protocol level that are the most successful. At least, obviously, there'll be a co-founder in a team, but they're starting from that baseline. They're thinking philosophically about the technology, which is interesting.
Just out of sheer curiosity, because as we've touched on, there's kind of specialization with the brains, especially when it comes to, say, something like AFA, where it may be slow and fat, and therefore it takes a defensive position. How does that translate to if I was then to put that brain into something that was trained for making art, or if it was a shopkeeper, or is it just going to be really bad with money as well? Like, how does the interoperability standpoint work?
Yeah, so that's the point of the Genome Matrix and engaging the builders who are building out these tools and experience. So AFA football is meant to be an example of how to use the protocol, how to deploy it. It's if you're thinking about Lego, it's the ship that's on the box that you can build, but you can go ahead and build a tower or a race car or whatever you want.
The Death Star.
With the tools. The Death Star. So the point around the genome matrices is that they provide a level of consistency across the board by exposing how those attributes are used in each game. So if you've got for instance, we've got an attribute called speed in AFA football, and another experience, a music experience, that could be responsible for how the AI's affinity towards high BPMs are. So you get this consistent experience across the board. So that if you've got a fast player in one game, it'll be a fast player in another game. Mm-hmm. If you're in a music space, it'll have something to do with speed. If you have the area for strength in one game, and you create a chatbot, that could other attributes in that area could be associated with things like aggressiveness or things that are associated with power, and all those sorts of things come from the same region. So that's how you get the consistency across the board with the interoperability.
Incredible. I'm conscious we started a little bit late and we may run over slightly, but I want to open it up to some questions from the audience. Do we have a roving mic?
Oh.
No?
Give me your mic. Yeah.
So you have a cable. What about that one there?
Test. Test 1, 2.
That works too. Hello.
Hey.
I've got like 5 questions, but I'm gonna just choose one.
Take a seat then.
No, I'll just choose one or so. So going back to the word singularity is something that kind of comes up, and you mentioned philosophy, Mike. And then you mentioned that the AI can take your place when you log off. I think from a philosophical standpoint, as the AI gets better and better and understands you better and better, there would definitely need to be a Scott's not here, some tag or something.
In case it robs someone.
Yes, exactly, because we don't want anyone to think that it's actually me. So that's one thing I was going to touch on. And the other thing was, kind of going back to the teaching the AI and having it learn from itself. It kind of goes back to this, this walking. I remember there was some test that they did where they had someone go in, build a rigged model in a 3D environment, gave it the physics, gave it the destination and the goal, and say, okay, get from here to here. And then it taught itself how to walk. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm thinking. But yeah, that was basically my question about the philosophical side of it.
So when you talk about the singularity, that's really interesting topic, and that's kind of the sci-fi space that people go into when they think about AI. Is there going to be a more intelligent AI that we can't control? And I think the philosophical answer to that, in my mind, is if that does happen, we'll never know that it happened. Just like a dog can't imagine the intelligence of a human, that the same way as if we ever create a more intelligent, a higher intelligence than us, we probably won't recognize it in the first place, from a philosophical point of view.
I gotcha. Thank you.
There are other people that believe that because there are elements of human intelligence that we're not good at. So, for example, remembering, every piece of information on Wikipedia. Like no human's going to be able to retain that. A machine can retain that. But the emotional intelligence aspect would be hard. That'll be one of maybe the last or the most difficult pieces for an AI to pick up on. So in a sense, the argument was, humans would continue to have relevance because we're going to be good at things the machines can't be good at. And then also, because the humans created the machines, there might be I don't want to use, maybe the word sympathetic isn't the right word because that also brings up other ideas, but it could work together. What do you guys think about that?
I think whatever the outcome is, we're going to want to own those private keys that control these AIs. We're not going to want that in the hands of it's a large corp, or the AIs themselves actually, or a large corporation. Especially when you start talking about AIs that's indistinguishable from humans, that it can be acting on your behalf and sitting in that world. You don't want that to be owned by somebody else.
I mean, I think you can also... So the kind of question really is, if AI, a generalized form of AI, can begin to do things better than humans, at what point do we notice, right? And you could argue, if you look at the stock market at the moment, I think like 90% of trading is done by high-frequency trading algorithms. So basically like 10% is people reacting, 10% of the global economy is people reacting to what bots have done. And so it's already winning that game, right? And the masters of those algorithms are winning that game invisibly to most of us, right? And so I think you're just going to start to see these series of games being won, and the owners or the controllers of those AIs amassing ridiculous levels of wealth, right, or power or influence.
Yeah, there was, just a bit of a side note, there was this mouse or rat that was basically, it would buy or sell stocks based on like which food bowl it would go from, and it outperformed most human traders. So I think that gives an indication.
And economists as well, right? That's the point.
I love that.
Okay, another question?
First of all, I've never been in a room with you, Mike, before. Thank you for hybrid theory. Thank you for the music you created. The guitar work is amazing. Awesome. But the production quality in the studios was outstanding for the time. It wasn't just the music itself, it was the production quality.
Thank you.
Which is fantastic.
It was an AI.
Yeah. I don't know you, but I bet you've got a couple of thousand music ideas you've put down as stems on tracks that you haven't released. It's not appeared anywhere. What are you going to do with that? Can you use AI with that? What are your plans? You're a content creator.
Yeah.
What is your opportunity for AI?
Yeah. Okay. So, unrelated to kind of this group, I'm involved first and foremost with a startup called Authentic Artists. They have if you're in the NFT space, you would have seen Warps. That was their generative drop. But that is, I'd say, like helping support the larger goal, which is music AI. And I'm one of the contributors on the music team. We're developing basically AI producers, music creators, and historically with music AI, what you've seen is either human creators creating loops, and the AI just chooses loops. That's very rudimentary. other side of what you would see is AI that analyzes waveforms and creates new waveforms based on previous waveforms. So if you look on YouTube, you'll find the Rickroll, Never Gonna Give You Up. You'll hear there's an AI, they trained an AI on that particular song and generated more of the song. It was like a 10-minute version of the song, and it sounds crazy. There's like, you can hear a vocal, but there aren't real words. Like, it's just analyzing, audio waveforms. What we're doing is something in the middle that I feel is a lot more effective. I say that and I say that they had already created it. I'm not on that team. But I am contributing to the sound selection process, which is, you've got the way a producer like myself might make a track. You have folders and folders and folders full of kick drums and snares and keyboards and guitars and all of these things. And the AI itself chooses everything. It chooses BPM, it chooses key, it even chooses plugins, it chooses, anyway. And the AI might be given a personality or music taste. So AI number 1 is a lo-fi beats kind of personality. AI number 2 is a trap beats kind of personality, and so on. And we paired those with basically avatar characters. It's like a Hatsune Miku AI mashup type of thing. I don't even know how to describe it. It's called Warp Sound, and the NFT PFP project is Warps with a V for an A.
When mint?
Go check them out for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just lastly, I saw you in 2003 FedEx Field in DC. You opened for Metallica.
We did.
Can you just tell me what that was like? Did they talk to you backstage? Did
They were amazing. No, they were so kind and like really, yeah, it was incredible. It was like a life-changing experience. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We actually...
They were good questions.
Sorry. We've actually run out of time for today. I really appreciate the time, really appreciate these incredible minds that we have up next to us. I know there's a lot more questions out there. Do feel free to try and pull one of these great visionaries aside and steal them when you see them around. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you around. And I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. I just want that on the record.